Well, we're halfway through. We're on chapter 4. There are 8 chapters. Let us go. One night I got this panicked call from Henry while we were finishing up our supper. I hadn't heard from him in forever, probably 10 years, and he wanted to know if I had the phone number for the Jones family. Frank Jones was his defense attorney from our neighborhood, and when I told him that Frank died a few years back, he hung up the phone. Didn't even say anything. I don't know why he was looking for Frank, and it's none of my business, but I thought it was a curious thing. Cheryl Carmichael, family friend, interviewed in 2010. Chapter 4, This Fat Mangled Mess. When I was 15, I spent a whole week throwing up, from morning until dusk every day, until there was nothing left inside me. I had the shakes, I felt rotten and confused, but the doctors couldn't find a thing wrong with me. Not a fever, not food poisoning, nothing. They said it must have been nerves. I could have told them that from the start. It had been a tough week, and my body was just trying to get rid of all that badness before the next week started. The last day I spent in Atlanta before I left for good reminded me of that feeling. That hunger for something better that comes when you get too lonesome. I had woken up early around 6 a.m. and just walked around every slab of cracked sidewalk and every corner of that no-good city, until I found myself downtown in the afternoon heat, staring at my hands thinking, God, what have I done? I had killed a man. It sounds crazy when you just up and say it like that, but it's the truth. And for some reason, I expected to be able to tell myself that I didn't regret it, that I'd done what any man would do in my position. But of course that ain't true. I felt like the cast-off part of a snakeskin, sick to my stomach, but nothing inside me to get rid of. 2 weeks before, my wife, God, her name, well, she had started acting different. She would be dancing around the house, singing to herself, picking up clothes from the floor and tidying up, heck, even doing the dishes before they were piled up in the sink. And she was always the type to leave the biggest mess wherever she went. An absolute tornado of a person. So I knew something was wrong when the house started becoming more organized. The mail that had previously been scattered around on the floor near the front door got scooped up and put into a filing cabinet in the kitchen. The stacks of old newspapers got thrown in the trash. All the dirty laundry got washed and then neatly folded away in the dresser. Hey, not that I complained exactly, but I knew something was up. The other thing she did was start taking night classes. The hell you taking classes for? I asked her. You gonna be a bookworm now? One of them college types with the glasses, speaking French and eating the good kind of cheese? I meant it's a joke, but she didn't laugh. Just headed out the door to the community college at 5 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday, and I didn't make it back until 11, sometimes 12 even. What would you do? Of course, I followed her. I had to borrow a car to do it, though. We still shared that old stolen 68 Pontiac Trans Am between the two of us, with a rebuilt engine. It still ran better than most new cars in those days, so I told the neighbor that I needed to borrow his truck to move some furniture. I called up my mother and asked if she could take care of Savannah for the night. She was just a little girl then, 2 or 3, and Grandma Turner loved babysitting, so it was easy. I'll be damned, but at first it seemed like she was actually heading to the community college. She even parked the Pontiac in the parking lot of the humanities department. But after a few minutes, this big semi-truck cab pulled up. Just a cab, no trailer, and she hopped in the passenger side and off they went. I followed him onto the passenger side. I followed him onto the I-20 interstate heading west. Minutes turned into hours. The I-20 turned into the I-40. And by God, they were still going. Was she leaving for good? Hell, I thought maybe they were making a break for the West Coast, and I just happened to follow on the day they decided to go for it. But then, just outside of Memphis, the semi turned on its blinker for the exit of some residential neighborhood, and they got off. I followed a good block or so behind, hoping they wouldn't see me. And they pulled up to a run-down little house at the end of the cul-de-sac on a quiet street. Now I had had a good 5 hours or so to get myself worked up, and by the time that bastard got out of his truck with my wife, I was fuming. Who the hell was this? Some fat, greasy trucker in a goddamn flannel? This was the bastard who'd be fucking my wife? I expected someone who was at least good looking. It was me. Not this pudgy piece of sway fluff. I waited in the car, getting myself into more and more of a frenzy, until I lost it. I just fucking lost it. I reached into the back seat of the car and grabbed the tire iron. Now, I don't remember the walk from the car to the house, but I do remember opening the bedroom door and seeing that trucker's hairy ass and her beneath him. I do remember bringing that tire iron down against the back of that bastard's head, and the way the blood speckled on the bed sheets like spray paint. I remember lunging for his neck with my bare hands and squeezing as hard as I could while he kicked and squirmed beneath me until every last breath of air was gone from his body, and this fat, mangled mess of hair, skin, and blood was left crumped in a pile on the edge of the bed. "Get in the car," was all I said to her. As I drove back east, my vision was like a laser, straight ahead on the road while she shook and cried in the passenger seat. A few hours went by, and a little bit after we passed the Georgia state line. I pulled off at an exit and parked at a Waffle House. "Get out," I said. She followed me into the Peck Diner. Now, I don't know what was going on that night, but I'd never before been in a Waffle House as busy as that one, and still haven't since. We sat down at the only empty table, and I just stared at her, studying the lines in her tear-soaked face, trying to get my thoughts in order. Eventually, the waitress came over. She was chewing her gum real loud and clicked the pen to write down her order. "How y'all doing tonight? Get you a cup of coffee to start with?" We didn't say anything, so she looked up at us, took one look, and got all concerned. "Honey, you doing okay? Listen, tell you what. Let me give y'all a minute. I'll be back when y'all are ready. Just give me a whistle. Take your time." When she walked away, I gathered up the guts to say something. The hell were you think? Why? Just tell me that one thing. Why? She sat there trembling, not saying a word, and I get more and more disgusted. Flat out disgusted. "God damn it, say something," I snapped. Just couldn't hold it in any longer. I leached across the table, grabbed her by the hair, and slapped her as hard as I could. "You gonna say something to me now? Go on, say something. God damn it." As she burst into tears, the rage just broke inside me. I stood up, grabbed her head, pushed her down onto the floor of the diner, and then kicked her right in the stomach like she was a rag doll. "Say something, you goddamn slut." I balled up my fists and started punching her in the face, over and over again. She shrieked and tried to cover her eyes, but I kept slugging her as hard as I could with every ounce of anger inside me. It was like the devil had taken over, and I was no longer in control. And it was horrifyingly liberating. There was this big group of fellas at the table next to us, and when they saw that, they stood up and ran over. One of them pulled me off her and began slapping me around, and pretty soon the manager burst out of the back room and kicked us all out. Told us to take outside, which we did. Now, rather than taking on 6 angry men by myself, I decided to defuse the situation and told them, "Listen, fellas, this is between me and the lady." I climbed back into the car. She followed, drove back to our house. Didn't say another word to each other for the rest of the night. Just went to sleep in the same bed. The room completely silent except for our careful, measured breathing and the ticking of the old wooden clock that we found one weekend at a garage sale for practically nothing. Next morning, like I said before, I just woke up and walked. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every time I looked over my shoulder, I expected a cop car to appear, ready to haul my ass off to prison. As I stood downtown in the shadow of my skyscraper, I remembered a conversation I once had with Jamie Remington. "Hank," he told me, "this is the city of the future. Atlanta's got it all. Sun, pretty girls, and all kinds of trouble to get yourself into. The place I come from, Cleveland, Ohio, I swear it, must be the toilet bowl of America. Ain't nothing there for jobs except those at the steel plant. And that's the most backbreaking work you can find this side of coal mining. Winter gets down to 20 below. Only people that live there are these old, ugly Polish bastards. And if you do happen to find a lady to take on a date, you can rest assured that she'll have arms the size of a tree trunk and the appetite of a lager. You want to find paradise, you start looking as far away from Cleveland as you can get." Well, the last thing I was looking for was paradise. And the furthest north I'd ever been was Nashville, Tennessee, on a vacation I'd taken with my grandfather once. If Cleveland was hell on earth, then I was heading to where I belonged. It was about time for a change anyways. Next, chapter 5.